Okay, so now we get to talk about probably one of the most important parts of the class, and that's the discussion sections. And the thing that makes this so important is the fact that the discussions are really taking the place of what we would be doing naturally in class. So I mean that to say my classes are usually constructed around us discussing issues. They are not built around me talking at you for hours and hours and you just writing a bunch of notes. My class is about you experiencing what is going on in the world. We look at a lot of videos, we talk about a lot of things, and then I ask you simply the question, what do you think? Or how do you feel about that? Or why do you think that happened? Or, why do you think this event took place the way it took place? Or what happens when you have an unintended consequence of an action that's taken? Why do we have protest? Why is civil rights still an issue today? Why is racism still an issue? Why? How did the Constitution become the Constitution? Things like that. And so, because of that, we have to be able to discuss those things. And the discussion section of the class is where we do this. So, I'm going to take the next 5 minutes or so, and I'm going to show you what I expect from you in the discussions. So what'll happen is when you come into the modules, and you'll come into basically from the top of the module where we go through our orientation, you'll step down just below there and you'll click here on the discussion video overview. And this will basically take you to the video you're watching right now. Now, what I'm going to do is let you see in terms of the context, this is really where a good chunk of your grade comes from, is from the discussions, because I really want to see what you think. And there is no perfect answer to any of this stuff. It's just really about you understanding and having a clear idea about a particular issue. So, for example, if I said to you, what do you think about women's rights? You may not be the expert in women's rights, but you may or should have an opinion about what it is or what you think about it. And out of this and out of the discussions, hopefully you'll advance your ideas and your thoughts, and people will learn from you and you will learn from them. And so basically I lay out for you here basically why they're important. And one of the key things I can't stress to you enough is the importance of the issue of plagiarism. You cannot and should not ever take anybody else's words and copy and paste them. Inside of the discussions, there is also a plagiarism checker, so we always check to see if something's been copied, and that includes from previous classes. So please don't do that. I really just want to know what you think, and in doing so, what I have done here is I sent in a link to give you some basic information about the discussions, and I give you some sample discussion posts. So if you look here, you can see, of course, I've made up some names like Mary Poppins. Like the first question here asks, how much power do you think the president truly has, for example? And then Mary Poppins responds to that question. And then several people, she will respond to other people's comments about that on their sites. Or if somebody responds to her first comment, then she can respond back to them on her own question. What's supposed to happen here, which I've now added, is at the end here, after she's made her first comment, what I'm looking for is for each person to come up with the next question. So like you'll see here, after her comment to Chase, she comes back with a question. Do you believe someone who has no military experience really is really capable or qualified to head the greatest military power of the world? So I'm looking for each of you to, as you respond to someone, that you come back with a question of your own to ask. This will allow us to continue the discussion and allow it to go in different directions based on the questions that you're asking. So I set it up with the initial question, but that's just to get your initial response. And I want you to note the length of this, because certainly one of the things that's important to me is that the length of your responses are really important. The opening response is fine. These are a little short, and now this is an earlier version, but now what I'm expecting for each of your responses or comments to be about this length, about a good paragraph. And again, you can see down here, she had several of these, so she has some really good comments around here. And here's another sample. So what I've done is I have put samples in here for you to look at so you can be able to see just exactly sort of the length I'm looking for and the context or detail that I'm looking for in the discussions. If you see something that's really if something's really short or doesn't really give me any information, like some of these things are pretty short here, even though they're leading questions, I don't really grade, these don't really get a lot of points for me. So be careful about just answering a question and not giving more detail. Again, this is an older version. The newer versions of this that we're doing, all the answers are looking a little longer like this or like this. So if you don't try to get away with just having short answers. Here's a third sample. This one's a little bit more like what we've done more recently. And you can see the length of the responses has gotten much, much better. And this person did extremely well on this. And I can even grade, there are a certain number of points allocated for each of your discussions. And I will even go above that point if I find you've done something really outstanding. So if 40 points were the allocation for the score and you did a really super job, I might give you 45 points. So I will always tell you that more is better when it comes to the discussions. Now, let me take you one other place to show you how this is going to work directly in your life. So this just gives you some samples to look at. Let me go to one of our weekly, when we get into the semester, I'll take you into, we'll start with week 1. And every week there's a discussion. Here's chapter 1 and during week 1, here's chapter 2, for example. And here's what happens. You'll click on the discussion. And by the way, let me just digress for one moment. The due date is right there in front of you. So you can see when you first come in that the due date for chapter 1 is June 27th. Now, you can turn discussion 1 and all the way to the very end of the summer session. However, it's important to note that after June 27th, it will be counted as late and there will be a few minor points deducted, because if you wait till the last minute, then there's no one who can discuss with you on the issues. I leave them open so that you can still get scores, but I'm also expecting you to try and get them done as quickly as possible with each week, if you can. Okay, so when you go in here, initially you'll see, again, it lays out the information. The due dates are all here, so your initial posts are due on Thursdays by Thursday evening. Your responses, meaning after your initial post, either your responses to your classmates, whether they're commenting on your initial response to my question or whether you're responding to one of their questions, are all due by Saturday. Now, again, as I've said, you still can you're still open to the end of the semester, but you lose points if you go beyond that. Now, the prompts, I've taken a different approach this summer because I've combined 2 of my classes. So I have 3 questions here, and you can pick any one of these or a couple of these to respond to, or all 3 of them if you want, and that would count that as 3 responses, or 3 of your questions being answered. And then you could then respond to a couple of your students, a couple of other students on these issues. But I try to give you enough questions there so you can either pick one or pick all of them to be able to respond to based on the videos that are listed below here. And this is something else that I've just recently started doing. So I have videos here that I want you to watch. And then after you watch the videos, I want you to go back and see about answering the question. Of course, in the context of looking at the chapter in the book as well. So the book chapter plus the videos that are linked in here should help drive you into your discussion and be able to help sort of fuel what your thoughts are. And this is the way I structure basically each chapter. So for example, and then by the way, so you'll see this and then you'll see a space on here where you'll be able to respond. So here's another example. This is chapter 3, which is arguably the most important chapter, at least as far as I'm concerned, right now and usually throughout American history, and it's a chapter on civil liberties and civil rights. And as you can see, again, there are several prompts that are listed here and several videos here that I want you to watch. And I want you to watch all of them, but it asks a couple of questions here. The first one says, do you think civil rights movement changed race relations in the U.S.? Do you feel that progress has been made? And then you would simply answer that question, and then others would respond to you, and hopefully you'll respond to them. and then, or you might pick one of the other questions or a couple of the other questions to try and answer. But again, I try to leave enough room. Some will have more than others, but I try to at least give you a couple of questions to answer. But again, you may feel free to pick one or pick more than one to do. Okay, that's it for the discussions. If you have any questions, let me know. Oh, one last thing. You will not be able to see other students' responses until you put in your first answer to one of the questions. So you will not be able to see other students until you actually type in your first response. And then after that, you'll be able to access the other students' comments and respond to them. Okay, see you at the next thing.